going on, everybody? Welcome, everyone, to the Best of, Worst of, the podcast where we take the bad with the good in the world of pop culture. My name is Jason, and my friend for the end of the world is my co-host, Jesse.
I'm honored. And also not near you at all as we try to record this remotely.
Yes, yeah, we're attempting, so we did a test the other night. It went okay, so yeah. We're trying this. We're hoping to avoid any issues.
Yeah, and what is already a shoddy venture, we're going to test the waters even further. And if this works, and we never have to see each other again, which I think is is a plus for both of us. So after bleeding red, white, and blue last week and talking fictional presidents, Jason and I have traded our ill-fitting bomber jackets and disdain for the Russians for an evacuation plan that will surely fail as we discuss BOWO disaster movies. Very apropos considering we might be living through one currently.
Yeah. For those of you out there, thanks for listening. We hope that we're providing you some humor and some entertainment in these dark and challenging days.
Yes.
And it's I don't know what else to say, man.
I don't know. I think
it's crazy.
We're all taking it day by day.
Yeah, it is. It's a day by day thing. I just saw this tweet and I thought this was perfect. It was a picture of Billy Mays. Remember Billy Mays, the OxyClean guy? Poor guy. Mm-hmm. And it said, all of 2020 so far. But wait, there's more.
Right. Pretty much. It's I'm trying to stay away from saying, well, what could possibly happen?
Don't say no. Don't say it, because
my favorite meme I've seen related to current events, I think, is in relation to COVID-19 and the recent passing of the great Kenny Rogers. And it said, Kenny Rogers passing away during COVID-19 is the most no one to fold him thing ever. And I thought that was pretty great.
That is excellent.
We had talked about doing disaster movies. I think we were going to originally do it towards the summer because those movies are typically big summer blockbuster flicks, and it just felt right. But in light of the pandemic, we thought now was good. So just be warned, like a meteorite-induced tidal wave, spoilers for the films we will be discussing are rapidly approaching. So seek high ground, or at least the skip button, for your own safety. Yes. But let's take the advice of our scientific advisors, Jason, and seek shelter in our favorite section.
Oh, would that be fun facts?
Yeah, that was it. That was almost the to call back to our fictional president episode. That was almost like Brondo, the thirst mutilator.
It was. I don't know what I was going to go for there, but I was trying to think of like what somebody would yell in a disaster movie.
Right. That sounds as good as any. So speaking of disaster movies, Wikipedia defines the disaster movie as a motion picture which depicts an impending or ongoing disaster as a central plot feature. The films typically feature large casts and multiple storylines that focus on the protagonist's attempts to avert, escape, or cope with the disaster presented.
I see. So like the movie Valentine's Day.
Exactly. We were all living. See, that was like a 4D experience where you are a part of the movie as you live through a disaster. Right. So I think that's something, and we'll get into this and the sort of different eras of disaster movies, because I think when I think of a disaster movie, having grown up in the 90s, I think of your meteorite collisions and your alien invasions and things like that are on like a real global scale. But really a disaster movie is any movie where the folks are just facing a disaster. It could be smaller scale. And that was the case in certain eras. So while some may consider the story of Noah and the Great Flood the original disaster flick, I think that's accurate, right?
Well, anybody that saw Darren Aronofsky's Noah would agree.
Right. that really says something to how much we love disaster flicks. It's in the Bible. Like there's even one in the
Yeah.
Bible.
Yes.
But as far as cinema is concerned, the honor for the first disaster flick appears to go to the movie Fire with an exclamation point from 1901. It was made by a gentleman named James Williamson, or as his friends call him, Jim Billiamson. I don't know what's going on there. I was trying to shorten his name. Jim Bilson. There we go. The silent film portrayed a burning house and the firemen who arrived to quench the flames and rescue the inhabitants.
Oh, sounds
so
intriguing.
all the way back to 1901.
Wow.
We were doing some version of the disaster flick. I don't suspect that there's a scene where the fire chief puts his foot up on a crate and tells the firemen, gives them a rousing speech to go fight the flames. But one can dream.
It's funny how these things changed.
Mm-hmm.
Some 40, 50 years later, with the onset of the Cold War,
Mm-hmm.
in the 50s, you saw disaster movies that were mostly made up of sci-fi movies, which were in alien invasions, end times, nuclear war, fallout. I think what is it? The Day the Earth Stood Still is kind of the
Right.
one that you can think of. Trying to think of some others from that era.
Yeah, but it was all very much in response to Godzilla. Was
Godzilla.
in response to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was all a big allegory for that. So like everything really shifted to this sort of a lot of Cold War stuff. There's a lot of what Day the Earth Stood Still isn't. I think that's the big central theme of that one is we're going to kill each other in nuclear war, and but that's where it kind of shifted in the 50s.
Yep.
The 60s were mostly the same, but then the 70s began what a lot of folks consider the golden age of the disaster movies, which began with 1970's Airport, a film about a suicide bomber threatening to blow up a Boeing 707 mid-flight. They didn't have Harrison Ford to stop it, I suppose. The movie was a commercial and critical success, and it was nominated for 10 Oscars, and it won one.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, this was sort of an era of disaster. So really, when we started getting into the research of this, I was like, well, we're going to be looking at movies from the 90s. And I didn't really, realize that the disaster movie really goes back to, really kicks into gear in the 70s. But it was smaller scale stuff.
Smaller scale, but critically acclaimed.
Yeah, which is something you definitely do not see in the 90s.
No.
So the 70s also saw some other critical and commercial successes in the Poseidon Adventure, which they remade into a horrible movie.
Mm-hmm.
The Towering Inferno, which was not a remake of Fire from 1901, Fire from 1901, and Earthquake. And all of those were nominated for multiple Oscars.
I think I've seen part of the Towering Inferno and part of Earthquake, but I don't think I've seen any of those all the way through.
Yeah, I think I might be the same. I know I've seen Poseidon Adventure. And I've
only seen
remake.
Poseidon. I've only seen the remake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to go back because it's got Gene Hackman and the like.
Kurt Russell on that?
I don't know. I just remember it. It's got Mr. Hollins in the remake. What's that dude's name? Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
In the remake, that's what I remember.
Yeah, I remember a scene of him kicking a bellboy down a burning elevator shaft, and it just being really jarring. Like you always see that in movies where they're like, "Cut it, we got to leave him," and they always find a way to save him. And I just remember in that movie, they're like, "You got to shake him off," because he's holding onto a guy's leg, and they're over a elevator shaft or something that's on fire, and they just kick him off, and he dies. And I'm like,
wow,
that seems like a comment on the way we treat the working class. I don't know.
Yeah, was that Josh Hartnett and Emmy Rossum in the remake?
Are they in that? Because Emmy Rossum's going to pop up later in our discussions.
Pretty sure Emmy Rossum is in it.
Rossum, that's awesome. The genre of disaster movies, it largely fell out of public interest by the 80s. But it would be revitalized in the 90s thanks to the advancements we made in CGI. Though, again, like I said, this revival of disaster movies saw the scope of the disasters grow. The film saw much less critical success, with one particular exception that we will be discussing in our best of section.
Yes, I'll just go ahead and confirm it was Josh Lucas and Kurt Russell and Richard Dreyfuss and Emmy Rossum
Okay. Yeah.
and the little scene Jacinda Barrett. All
No.
all good mid 2000s actors and
Yeah.
actresses.
Well, and Kurt Russell's having a bit of a comeback as of late. I think he's been doing all
Yeah,
right for himself,
yeah.
thanks to the Santa Claus movies, which I think they're making. I think they're doing a sequel to, which will be a
uh,
disaster flick in itself.
Nothing like Elvis Santa Claus.
Right. That's what everybody was clamoring for. Netflix knew it. They're like, this is a genre that no one's tapped into.
Right.
Elvis Santa Claus. When we got the perfect guy for it.
Right.
So, what are
But
some of your favorite films from of the disaster movie genre?
all right, now I think this is all colored by when you grew up and
Sure.
kind of what appeals to you. And I judge this on rewatchability. Okay, now
Yeah.
the first two, Twister and Dante's Peak, I've seen those movies easily 8 to 10 times each.
Oh yeah.
If it's ever on cable and you're flipping, I stay with it.
I've seen Twister probably 8 times this month. So that's or at least parts of it. That is Twister is one of my favorites as well. I do like the smaller scale, but you get all the spectacle of like the larger scale stuff. You get
Yeah,
structures being destroyed violently, and but it's smaller scale with just those group of storm chasers, and it just makes you want to be a storm chaser. I love that movie.
it does. I always wanted to be like the Philip Seymour Hoffman and have that kind of
Yeah,
doofusy looking hat, but
yeah,
like a lot of cool tech.
yeah, like a Twizzler machine, and you're listening
Yeah.
to the song "Hocus Pocus" by the band Focus. Uh,
Right.
yeah, I want so I wish like in my head I'm like I would be Philip Seymour Hoffman, but I would probably be more of the I can't remember his name. He's from Ferris Bueller. He's his friend, Alan something.
You'd be
Alan
Alan
Ruck.
Ruck.
I
Yeah,
would be
you'd
Alan
be
Ruck.
Alan
I'd be
Ruck.
like getting all like throwing hissy fits over people folding my maps. That would be the storm chaser that I
By
am.
the way,
Like,
since you made the reference, I'll just go ahead and throw this out. Uh, Recently introduced my son and my wife to Ferris Bueller.
oh, okay.
Um, it as a movie, I
Hmm.
don't think really holds up. There's just not. I mean, it is just. It's like a series of tomfoolery vignettes,
Right.
and it just I understand the through line. It just it's ludicrous when you look back on it. And the fun parts are still fun, but
Yeah.
overall, it's I don't think it's a I'm gonna it's not a good movie. It's not a
Yeah.
good movie.
I've never found the character of Ferris Bueller likable. I like Alan Ruck's character better. I feel bad for, well, I forget his name. What's his name in the movie?
Cameron.
Cameron, yes. I just kind of felt bad for him. So to explain why I've seen Twister so much, that is me and my wife's like go to. We have no idea what else to put on. We want to put on something that we're going to have to pay attention to. Movie
Yeah,
like,
and it's Twister.
and it's Twister, and it's just it's so easy to watch. I'm going to get this complaint out real quick, and then we'll talk about some other favorite disaster movies. Um, in the beginning of Twister, it
Yes.
starts with a flashback to Helen Hunt's character Joe Harding, her childhood, where there's a twister, and that's the titular twister. That's an F5 hand of God.
When
Is
I was growing
hitting.
up, the titular Twister was something very different.
You can't wear that sweater to school, son. You'll get a titular twister. Um, so in the beginning of Twister, there's a tornado happening, and uh, their Helen Hunt's dad is getting their family to their storm cellar, and he successfully gets everyone to the storm cellar, and he like the dog's kind of lagging behind. He opens the door back up and gets the dog in, and then latches the door, and the twister is like on them, and he for some reason moves from his spot in the back of the cellar with his wife and daughter and goes and tries to hold the door shut as the twister hits, and is like, I can't hold it, and then the twister sucks the door off, and he gets sucked into the tornado. While this is happening, Helen Hunt's character, that is a little girl, and the mother and the dog, the tiny little Yorkie Toto looking dog, are in the back of the cellar, unfazed by the twister. I'm like, why didn't you just go stand in the back with them? Why are you trying to hold the door shut?
I don't understand.
Like, their hair's barely blowing in the wind, and this dude's like, I gotta hold the door shut. I'm like, no, go into the back of the cellar, man. And I say this every time me and my wife watch it, and she always says, well, if he didn't die, then she wouldn't have gotten the storm chasing. I'm like, well, there you go.
Right. There has to be an inciting incident.
Right.
Don't you know anything about writing?
There's a better way to do that scene. Like, maybe he's got the door shut and they're safe and they realize the dog isn't with him, and then he goes to open the door to let the dog in and then gets caught and gets blown out. Or maybe he's like got the door held open and letting them all get in there, and he's just too late and doesn't get in there in time. Like, don't have him get in there, get to safety, and then for no reason, like,
I completely agree.
Yeah,
I completely agree. It's always bothered me.
That's my rant on Twister.
I got you. I'll just say, and I won't go very long on it. Dante's Peak is utterly rewatchable for me, and I don't know if it's
that's the one with Pierce Brosnan, right?
It's Pierce Brosnan, and I'm blanking on her name. I almost said the wrong name. It's Linda. It's from Terminator.
Oh, Hamilton?
Linda Hamilton.
Yeah.
Linda Hamilton. And they're in I think they're like in Oregon or California, and they're up in the mountains, and a volcano comes, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good, fun stuff.
It's fun. Better than the movie Volcano, which also came out, I think, that same year.
It did. And then The Impossible is my kind of out there pick. That one doesn't have as much rewatchability. It's much less fun. It's about the
what's based on a real
tsunami
event, right?
It's based on a real event, so it's based on the tsunami that hit Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, probably 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's based on a true story of kind of survival of that, and it's very. Have you seen it?
I have not. I've heard it's harrowing.
It is harrowing. It's troubling. It's gut wrenching at times. It's just emotionally overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm sure the COVID-19 movies are going to be in 3 years.
Well, my COVID-19 movie is me trying to get my son to watch Stone Cold Steve Austin matches with me.
There you go.
In a pair of like board shorts and a sweater. So I told my wife, I was like, I really thought in the apocalypse I would look cooler. I would have like a leather jacket and a mohawk, and like biker boots, and I'd look like I'm supposed to be in Mad Max, but in reality I'm wearing like a Toy Story shirt and some sleep pants.
That's right. We would much rather fit in with the some extras from Shaun of the Dead.
Right.
We're not Mad Max people.
No. For me, favorite disaster films, I mentioned on our fictional president episode, I really love Deep Impact. I just think for a disaster movie, it hits the emotional tones a little bit better. The scale of the disaster feels bigger and kind of the impact feels deeper. but it does, like, it some really bad things happen in that movie, and like it doesn't, a lot of the disaster movies, like they kind of, they get saved at the last second sort of stuff, but that one you get a payoff, and I think the emotional stuff supports that as well. Yeah. But Independence Day, ID4 as you hate to call it, is a lot of fun, obviously. It's got those, disaster movies of the 90s, and in my head, to be a really true disaster movie, you've got to show a major historical landmark or structure being destroyed, and Independence Day gives it to you in spades.
Yes, it does.
And if we're counting, go ahead.
No, I was going to make some stupid joke about the only thing that gave you more spades is Saturday Night Live. I was trying to make like a David Spades joke, but
you could say a Just Shoot Me marathon.
A Just Shoot Me marathon. That's it. I couldn't think of it.
And speaking of David Spade, my favorite monster movie might be, if we count
Joe
those, Joe Dirt 2. Cloverfield. Cloverfield could be. It's got, you get Statue of Liberty getting destroyed. There's some disaster movie-esque stuff happening there. Although I guess that would more count as a monster movie.
So you like the destruction of a postcard background item, and
Yeah.
I think I'm in it for the harrowing stakes and the gathering of the family together. It seems.
Right. Yeah. I like when they can pull off both. I mean, like I said, if I'm watching a disaster movie, I want to see some big action. If you can show me Mount Rushmore getting destroyed, sweet. But if there's a love story in there between a couple of teenage actors in their 30s, then I'm all for that too. What do you have a preferred source of disaster? Like, what?
Whatever I can.
Yeah, what's happening?
Go ahead. Whatever
No, go ahead.
I can distance myself from the most. Whatever I can imagine will not happen.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure like a twister could happen, but I purposely don't live in the Midwest. I have a lot of family in the Midwest. Tsunami, not as big a concern here. A volcano, probably not going to happen in the Carolinas.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are some of my favorite movies. They're things that are not going to happen. I mean, I guess I would go, if you went with the big ones, I'm going to go with Aliens, because I think that's the least likely. Then you got Meteorite, and then the sickness ones, or the contagions, the zombie stuff. Even right now, the viral zombie stuff is just like not on my radar right now. Not something I want to partake in.
That's a good segue to mention real quick here. What kind of got us, helped us decide to move this up? Obviously COVID-19 and the coronavirus going on, but I think I don't know how recently you've seen it. My wife and I rewatched right when all of the coronavirus stuff was really starting to amp up. Contagion, from what now, probably close to 10 years ago, I guess.
I think it was 2010 or 2011. I'll look it up.
Contagion, great movie, and a disaster movie that you don't really think of as a disaster movie. It's a big ensemble cast, a really stacked cast, and some great performances. Matt Damon is great in that movie, and Kate Winslet too. But they're facing a very rapidly and progressing and a very aggressive virus with like a 30% mortality rate. And in the current climate, it's there's parts of that movie that definitely land more, because as you're watching this, my wife's like, gosh, she's like, things are so so crazy in that movie, like just the way like society is like sort of collapsing, and the measures they're going to try and get through this virus and everything in that movie. And I'm like, well, we're at like a 3% mortality rate, and look at how we're already acting. I mean, they're talking a 30% mortality rate in that movie. The thing that movie does really well, and I think again it lands better now that we're in a pandemic, is you're watching scenes of like a person will like cough in their hand and then touch like a subway railing, and you're just, and it's like someone just got shot. You're like, no, like, don't sneeze.
Yeah. That's how we all feel now.
Right. It makes the mundane like really like, really harrowing. That's our word of the week.
It is harrowing.
And then there's Outbreak, which is not as good and sillier, isn't it?
Outbreak is silly.
Yeah.
Did not see.
Yeah. That one's all about monkeys and stuff.
It is. I was listening to you, but I was also reading about Contagion.
I thought you got quiet. I was like, oh no, our call dropped.
I was like, maybe I do need to rewatch. This thing has a ton of people. It looks really good.
Yeah. Lawrence Fishburne and Jude Law.
Yeah. Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Marion Cotillard.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people
cast
in this.
Yeah.
Well,
Gwyneth Paltrow is in it. Matt Damon, again, obviously a really great performance. But I'm going to say my favorite is probably Meteorite. I think that's the most fun, especially when you get the payoff of the meteor hitting, which you don't get in a lot of movies. Deep Impact gives it to you in spades once again.
Wow.
Armageddon, very disappointing in its lack of meteorite.
Yeah, but it's got a
Calamity.
killer theme song. All
Yes, it
right.
does.
Armageddon wins in the theme song battle. It wins in the humor battle. It wins in the Affleck screen time battle, considering
that's
Deep
true.
Impact has none.
It wins in the sexualizing animal cracker category.
Wow. I don't remember that. I don't remember
He
that.
has like the animal cracker, and Ben Affleck's like running it up Liv Tyler's belly or something.
Oh,
like,
yes.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Michael Bay made animal cookies,
Young
animal crackers.
Jason was confused, but intrigued.
I get confused every time I eat an animal cracker.
Yeah.
Get all hot and bothered. No. So speaking of great theme songs, that leads us perfectly into our best of.
Our best of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hit us with it.
Let's go. Near, far. I don't know what I'm doing. That song, I listened to that song way too many times. So yeah, the best of disaster movies is Titanic.
Titanic, based on an actual event. That's
based
rare.
on an actual event, which is unique. It is, and I do think this hands down, it is the best. Of course, I've just lost my screen that had my information on it. Sorry, I'm struggling.
We all are.
This remote thing is not helping. I was trying to find the Rotten Tomato score. Do you have that Rotten Tomato score?
Not handy. You talk.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
All right, I'll talk while he looks it up. So, Titanic, released December 19th, 1997, written and directed by James Cameron. This was James Cameron's 7th movie, believe it or not. The 7th movie he made. And what's insane is he has only directed one feature film since then.
That's
since
wild.
1997.
89%, by the way.
89%.
And interestingly, if you Google Titanic, the first thing that comes up is the movie, not the actual ship. So if you need to know the impact that it had.
This had an impact. Yeah, so what's crazy is that he's only directed one movie since, and at this rate, I'm not sure those other avatars are ever coming out.
Well, they just finished shooting them, two of them, didn't they? Shoot two back to back?
No, they suspended. They're shooting 4 back to back.
Oh, my Lord.
And I think they come out in 21, 22, 23, and 24.
Ugh. Okay.
Yeah. I have no desire.
I didn't care for the first one, so.
No, it was just all right. Titanic, I would say arguably, let's go ahead and say this. I don't think James Cameron has made a bad movie.
Yeah.
He's only made 8, but I don't think he has made a bad movie. And this might not even be top 5. I was just going down the list of James Cameron movies.
Oh, what? You don't think Titanic is in the top 5 of his 8?
Terminator 2, Aliens, True Lies, Titanic. Like, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That's the order I'm going. You might sneak it up to number 3 if you think it's better than the first Terminator and True Lies. He's made a lot of good movies.
Titanic is so different than Terminator. It's hard for me to think. I'm trying to think if I had to choose between Terminator 2 or Titanic, which one would I pick?
Better. No, Terminator's 2 better.
They're so different, though. I mean, I do really like Titanic, but anyway.
Titanic is super fun. All right, so starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, old Billy Zane. Where are you?
The Phantom.
Where you been? Yeah, I hadn't seen. I think of him more from Dead Calm. Remember Dead Calm?
No.
Wait, you're not a Dead Calm guy?
No, I don't know. What is that?
Okay, I'm going to give you just a second to look up Dead Calm. It needs to be seen by your eyes. It is. Okay. So just imagine that this is a tangent. But you know what? It's related because it involves water and boats. Yeah. And Billy Zane. Okay, I'm just going to set the stage. Young Nicole Kidman
Okay.
and her husband Sam Neill are
Okay.
on a sailing trip around the world. Billy Zane, bad guy, gets onto the boat. Things ensue. It's called
Okay.
Dead Calm. It's kind of this kind of 80s actiony thriller thing, and it was on the Superstation every Saturday of my childhood.
Uh,
I've seen it
hmm.
6 or 8 times. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie.
I'll check it
Um,
out.
anyway, Billy Zane, Kathy Bates, so many other folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I blanked on his name. I thought I looked up his name. The guy that plays the conductor.
Oh
And,
yeah. Or
uh,
the conduct.
Bernard Hill, who was
Okay.
also in like Lord of the Rings, and he's just one of that guys. Like when you see him, he's always got the beard. And I was watching clips of this. Like my favorite clip is that King of the World clip where they like set sail and he just says, you know, take her out to sea, and they
Yeah.
go out and Jack's out on the front of the boat, and just the visual spectacle of this movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. It holds up
Nominated
too.
for nominated for 14 Academy Awards. I'm all over the place on this. Hey, we're gonna do some fill in the blank guessing
Okay.
time for Jesse. I'm
Yes.
gonna turn the tables on you.
Okay.
Nominated for 14 Academy Awards,
Okay.
which ties this with blank movie for the most Oscar nominations ever.
Okay. I think we may have brought this statistic up in our Oscars episode. I'm going to say Return of the King.
No.
No.
Now,
Okay.
I'm assuming somebody's updated Wikipedia since 2003.
Mm.
But it is 1950s All About Eve.
Oh, okay.
Who had the most nominations? I think the Lord of the Rings was like the most nominations to sweep them all.
Okay.
It was something unique like that.
Okay.
All right. Now, of the 14 it was nominated for, Titanic won 11 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director.
Yeah, I think
Those
that's
11 Oscar wins tied it with what film for the most wins for a single film?
Return of the King.
No, it's not Return to the King.
What? Man, I was so sure. Okay.
According to Wikipedia, it is the 1959 epic Ben-Hur.
Wow. Okay.
Which I've never seen. Again, these are all according to Wikipedia, so this could be completely unfactual.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, this was the first film to reach the $1 billion mark.
Can you believe that? Like Secret Life of Pets 3 will do $2 billion.
Yeah, the top 25 movies all time have all done over $1 billion now. Just because of worldwide box office. It doesn't even matter. But back then, like this was unheard of. And then they re-released it in 3D and it made another 350 million and now it's over 2 billion. Like it's insane. And
crazy.
this was the highest grossing film of all time for 13 years. Until what movie passed it in 2010?
Avatar.
Yes, James Cameron beat himself with Avatar.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Return of the King is tied with Titanic and Ben-Hur for 11 Academy Award wins, and it was nominated for 11. So you were right; it swept its categories. It was nominated for less than Titanic, but won just as many.
Got it. Okay, so I knew it had swept. So
and you know
I'll need to update this Wikipedia entry.
It did it without a single Kate Winslet nude scene. Although that scene where Frodo draws Gandalf is similar.
Yeah, it does have a similar, like when Gandalf drops the cape.
Yeah,
wow.
And
cloak,
he says, he says, sketch me like one of your French orcs. That's great.
All right, that was pretty funny. Yeah. All right, Titanic. If you're not familiar with Titanic, and I'm assuming most of our audience is because of I'm assuming demographics. But if you haven't seen Titanic, it tells the story of the Earth's most fateful boat ride through the
Yes.
eyes of star-crossed lovers. It's essentially Romeo and Juliet on a boat.
Yeah.
And I think James Cameron does a great job of populating this story and fleshing out the characters and populating the ship with interesting people and interesting pockets throughout this whole ship
Hmm.
that really elevates what could be a straightforward disaster flick into a really captivating love story that happens to involve a disaster.
Right.
I
Yeah.
I I, I think he does a really good job at that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the really interesting thing that it does is where any other disaster movie, the disaster is what the movie's about, and you could make the argument that that's not the case for this one. Like the love story and the commenting that it's doing on like the differences in like their social class and stuff between
Oh yeah.
Rose and Jack. That is the main story that they just happen to be on the Titanic. Like it. Um, it's interesting, like to where the love story is almost as
It
big
does.
as the disaster that happens in it.
You're right. And I think we find ourselves imagining, like, what if they had just been on a different ship?
Yeah.
What if they had
Right.
made it to the US? What if they had,
Hmm.
all these type of
What if
things?
she had just let him get on that door? Like,
Right.
get
Right.
him up on there. There's plenty of
That
room.
there's so much room. Um, I don't know if you, I don't know, I can't remember how old you were, but probably quite small when this movie came out. But this was like I remember reading, this was when you were first starting to hear things about movies, and you would hear about, man, they're making this is kind of pre-internet, but still like,
Yeah.
E.T. You'd watch E.T. and they'd be like, not since Waterworld has there been a movie this expensive. And they
Right.
built this whole new studio and this whole new water set down in Mexico. And you'd hear all these things about what was going
Yeah.
on. You're like, man, alive, what are they doing? And so the scope and the spectacle was so huge for this. And I will tell you, when this came out, I probably saw this at least twice, maybe three times in theaters. And it was mostly because uh, every girl I knew wanted to see this. So like I went at least once with my then girlfriend, now wife. I think my family went. It's weird, and I,
Yeah.
I just need to be clear. We went multiple times, and it's not because this was a PG-13 movie that 16-year-old Jason could get into that featured some tawdry scenes.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with it. It was all about the story and the spectacle and
Sure.
letting the girl in your life clasp onto your arm during the scary parts and
Hmm.
cry the emotional parts, right?
Yep. And then
It was
wonder afterwards
fake.
if you would be as brave as Jack. And then the
Oh
look of
no.
disappointment on their face when they realize, no,
Yeah,
decidedly.
as soon as they realize, yeah, you're not going to.
Yeah.
At 195 minutes, which is 3 hours and 15 minutes for you non-film types, um, this movie really has time to unfold the sinking ship in spoiler alert. Sorry, the ship sinks. Um, in in real time.
What?
So, um, I think that's another really cool thing is it took about an hour and a half for the ship to sink, and you kind
Yeah.
of the tension builds throughout that. I think it's really kind of cool. But I
Oh
think
yeah.
this movie is extremely effective. It not only shows us the peril, like a lot of disaster movies are good at showing us the peril, the showing us the explosions, the you know Eiffel Tower being blown up. I don't think that's in any movie, but
No.
yeah,
But yeah.
Carlsbad Caverns being eviscerated, or what are some other things that get destroyed? I'm trying to think of things that have never been destroyed in film. Okay.
I'm drawing a
Um,
blank.
when Niagara Falls gets frozen over by the
Right.
alien invasion.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's really, really effective at leaning into the advancements of special effects in 97
Yeah.
and and showing us that peril, but also helping us to feel it. Because if you look back at the other 90s action movies and then even back to the ones back in the 70s, honestly, I don't think the storytelling was there then to really make us feel or emotion pull those emotions out of us. And
Yeah.
I think Cameron does great. It's completely worth your time if you have 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Right.
What are your thoughts? What's your relationship with the movie?
I was 8 when it came out. I remember probably 8, or maybe I may have been 9 before I saw it, because it took some time for it to come out on VHS. But I remember, like you said, it was a big thing. It was cultural touchstone. Even at that point, not even like just looking back on it, like it was just a big deal. That movie was, and it had come and gone through theaters, and knew people who saw it, and of course, as a 9-year-old, I was quite excited at some of the scenes I'd heard about, and and then my
Really? For
mom,
that young
yeah,
a bloomer.
yes, oh yeah, I'm a debaucherous man. Um,
You're a man, exquisite passion.
um, no, my mom worked at Winn-Dixie, and I remember the day she came home, like they had got it, like we're selling, like it had come out on VHS, and they were selling it at Winn-Dixie, and she bought it and brought it home, and
It
it
was
was the
two
dual
tapes, right?
dual
Yeah.
VHS. Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And although I watched the second one much more than the first one, for certain reasons, and no, but I remember us watching it, and I remember that scene, the tawdry scene coming up, and um, my mom saying, "Cover your eyes," and me not covering my eyes in any effective way.
It's
Um,
much milder upon revisiting than you
yeah.
ever thought
Oh
in the
yeah.
day, than you
Oh,
ever imagined.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You can see that, they probably show it unedited on TBS now,
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, but aside from all that, it was, as I've gotten older and watched it, yeah, I really appreciate what James Cameron pulled off with it. Um, and, as a fan of disaster movies, like when that ship starts sinking, and as also just like someone fascinated with the Titanic, like yeah, I've gone to the Titanic Museum in Gatlinburg a couple of
Oh yeah.
times with my
Yeah.
family, which is really, it's
Put your
really
hand in
interesting, and
cold
it's
water.
just, yes, yeah, absolutely. You get to feel, yeah, you go out on the deck and feel like how cold the water is. It's wild, and it's just, there's something just so, it's really tragic, and I think, it's just such, we don't think about, how really tragic that event was, because it's just so, it's just so a part of our cultural DNA at this point. We make jokes about it, and and everything, because so much time has passed, but it really was like a, a terrible event,
Yeah.
and I think the movie does a pretty good job of showing that. And I know those are some of my favorite scenes from the movie, is when the ship is sinking, and the spectacle of the ship sinking is certainly like fun to watch, for lack of a better term, but it's definitely compelling. But I like the little moments they show while the ship's going down. You get to see the band playing on, and you get to see, the old couple deciding to stay in bed, and like the mother, like who's in the third class, like working class deck, that's not going to be able to get out, and like just trying to keep her children comfortable and calm, and stuff like that is
Yeah.
like really, has always stuck with me. Um, and
Yeah.
I think, again, in a movie of so much spectacle and whatnot, for it to have as much heart, even if it is at times kind of saccharine sweet, I think um, it does a great job of balancing those two
Yeah.
things.
I agree. I agree.
It,
All right. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say it does a much better job of it than our worst stuff.
Right. So let's pivot over to worst of. Jesse, tell us all about the worst of.
So when we were looking at disaster movies and the lowest rated scores, we came pretty close to doing The Happening, which I think is
Yeah.
a disaster movie. I don't think we really think of it that way. I think of it more of as, I guess, just a suspense sort of thriller. But The Happening is at 18% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's right.
But it is a global scale, sort of
It is. There's not much
event of
happening in it
mass
other
death and
than,
things.
yeah, did you see the trees move?
Yeah, and Mark
Uh,
Wahlberg talking to plastic trees.
yeah. Yeah.
But we decided, if you're talking about disaster movies, you have to talk about the work of Roland Emmerich.
You have to.
So Roland Emmerich has directed such disaster films as both the Independence Day movies, one of which was good, 1998's Puff Daddy infused Godzilla.
Yes.
And 2012, which confusingly came out in 2009, White House Down and Midway, which I just recently saw Midway, and it's terrible. But White House Down and Midway, which have some disaster film elements. It's big historic events or like big, spectacle events, with like, White House Down being, this. It's just like taking these really common set pieces, like of like the White House, and something unspeakable happens to it.
Yeah.
But in this case,
I was going to say Roland Emmerich has directed 7 films in the last 10 years.
Oh wow, that's
just for a reference point.
Yeah,
compared to old Jim Cameron in his entire adult life.
That's wild.
All right. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
I thought that was interesting.
I will say my favorite Roland Emmerich film is not a disaster movie, and it's The Patriot. I love The Patriot.
Patriot is
not the one with Steven Seagal.
It's a war movie. I was gonna say, who could it be a disaster for? But no, it's that and Universal Soldier's not terrible.
Yeah, no, that one's pretty good. But the one we're talking about today is I think one of the most disaster movie, at least of the 90s genre of disaster movies, is The Day After Tomorrow.
Day After Tomorrow. Just watched it the other night with the family.
Yeah, we did too. So it came out on May 17th, 2004, and it has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 44%, which is pretty average, really, for the 90s disaster movies.
Yeah, I was going to say that's almost positive.
Yeah.
For a disaster movie from the
90s.
Yeah,
if you're like north of 50, you're doing pretty, like you're doing great. For your, again, that's for your like volcanoes, your Dante's Peaks, your Armageddons, your Deep Impacts. Those all rank in the 30s and 40s for the most part. 50 is when you're getting like some really great stuff. But Day After Tomorrow is a 44, and it stars Dennis Weird Triangle Smile Quaid. Have you ever noticed how weird and triangular his smile is?
I will now.
It's gotten worse as he's gotten with some work done on his face, but he has a weird triangle smile. Watch The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. He does a lot of triangular smiling in that movie.
Okay.
Jake Gyllenhaal is also in the movie, as is Emmy Rossum, and Cecilia Ward. So The Day After Tomorrow tells the story, if you haven't seen it, of the world being suddenly and violently impacted by man-made climate change, resulting in massive tidal waves in New York. Yeah.
Hashtag fake news.
It's a Chinese hoax.
Right.
No, so it tells the story of the world, climate change happening overnight pretty much. And it results in massive tidal waves in New York, tornadoes in LA, temperature drops so drastic that they will freeze you to death where you stand. So the movie was praised for giving, at the time, this was right around the same time, maybe a little right around the same time as An Inconvenient Truth.
An Inconvenient Truth? That's my Al Gore impression.
I thought you were doing Snagglepuss. It's better than my Jerry Seinfeld at the end of last week's episode. Good Lord. I don't know what happened on that, but go back and listen to the very, very, very end of Fictional Presidents if you'd like to hear just the worst Jerry Seinfeld impression. But this movie was this was right around that same time where climate change was really starting to ramp up in our sort of public conscience. And this movie, Day After Tomorrow, was praised for giving a mainstream big budget outlet for acknowledging that very serious issue of climate change, but it was also criticized by the scientific community for making the issue seem cartoonish due to the scale of the events depicted. I enjoyed this quote in our research. Paleoclimatologist William Hyde of Duke University said that the film is to climate science as Frankenstein is to heart transplant surgery. Which
that's a good quote.
That way. A lot happens in this, and it tries to make it sound very scientific. Dennis Quaid's character plays a paleoclimatologist in the movie, and it's in the movie they acknowledge that, like, he is saying, this was supposed to happen, over the next 150 to 200 years, and it's basically happening overnight. It's this giant storm cell that's caused by the rapid cooling of the ocean currents and the atmosphere and whatnot. So it tries to give a scientific spin on it, but it does come across as sort of like, let's just keep saying scientific words and no one will notice. A lot of people did notice. It's as scientifically accurate as Gladiator is historically accurate, I think. But the movie did quite well. A movie of this spectacle costs a lot of money, especially in 2004 dollars. It was a $125 million budget, which is pretty steep. But it brought in a box office of $552 million.
Wow.
We love seeing our giant structures being destroyed, and this one does deliver on that. It has, so as a self-described fan of the disaster movie, especially again of the 90s blend, it has some of the best disaster sequences that you're going to get in a disaster movie, and it gives you a little bit of everything. So you've got tornadoes in LA, which is probably my favorite disaster sequence in that movie.
No, it's great. The Capitol Records building.
Yes. Fantastic. And like the news reporter getting smacked with the billboard, and like, the guy running into the room, and then like you hear, this terrible noise, and like the guy opens the door, this other guy opens the door, and like the room, like the entire side of the building is just gone. Like this stuff like that is like really like whoa when you're watching it. It really delivers on that. And you got like the giant tidal wave that comes through New York, which is terrifying. But so the problem with this movie, and the problem with a lot of disaster movies, is it shows its hand too early, and you get all of the disaster movie stuff by like the halfway point of the movie or right around. And this one tries to stagger it out, and you get a few different pretty great disaster like set pieces. But by the third act, the stakes are now just too small, because all the disaster stuff's happened. So
isn't it like it's getting cold in a library?
Yeah,
we've got to fight a wolf.
You remember that fantastic scene of being cold in a library? Not since the Page Master.
No, you can't burn that. You can't burn that book. No.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, that's like where they're drawing their action from, Right. Not since the Page Master has there been such action around books. So the third act sees plot devices such as a wolf attack on a Russian merchant ship that is in the streets of New York. That scene is pretty cool, where the ship just comes floating down New York's, like the streets of New York, like this giant like merchant like freight ship. But then there's wolves that try to attack them when they go to get medicine because someone cut their leg, and that's what's it gets really convoluted there towards the end.
There was one scene where I swear to you, it was just somebody looking at a pool of water, just calling somebody's name for like 3 minutes. I was watching this the other night. It was just like, Jim, are you in there?
Right.
It's just 3.5 minutes. That might be in the library. I love the library stuff, if you can't tell.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, and there is, like I said, there is some, like the freezing to death stuff is kind of frightening, But again, just so impractical, and like, just I don't know. It the best I can put it is it just, and that's the good thing about Deep Impact. Deep Impact, it saves. Now it makes the movie a little bit slower in some people's eyes because you don't get the big disaster thing till the end, but just like you're waiting the whole time for it, and then when it finally happens, it's just such a release of just tension. Like you're just like yes. Not unlike that scene in Titanic, just a release of tension. But this one, like I said, it just does too much, and then at the end, the big climax of your movie is Dennis Quaid walking across the ceiling of a glass mall. Like it kind of falls short. But the movie also has some like kind of heavy-handed political leanings that, while not invalid, they're just really heavy-handed. So there's like a weak and stubborn vice president character that is portrayed by a Dick Cheney lookalike, and it features news reports of Americans illegally immigrating across the Texas border to Mexico to escape the disasters, because it's mostly affecting like the northern hemisphere.
Interesting.
And those are like, I like the irony of those, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they literally say, in an ironic turn of events, Americans are crossing the Rio Grande into
Oh,
Mexico. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get what you're going for here. You don't have to like say this is really ironic. Like,
right.
I
You
get
can
what you're
just show
trying
us
to
and we get
comment
it.
on. Yeah,
Right.
and Roland Emmerich is, I think, famously, very liberal, and again, those messages are fine. I like the sort of satire or the irony of this, kind of turning the tables, and and folks having to immigrate, having to immigrate illegally to Mexico. I like what that's saying.
Yeah.
I just don't need to be told, "Hey, did you notice what we did there?"
Right.
So the movie does that. It's big popcorn. It's a big popcorn movie that tries to say something and ends up just sort of um, sounding like a college kid who like took some classes and thinks he's like worldly now. That's what the movie comes off to me.
Dude, I'm going to the beach because I'm not gonna have my ruined spring break by grandpa disease or whatever this thing
Right.
is.
Right. That's
Right?
it. That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the guy. That guy is
It's
the day
that
after tomorrow of his fraternity.
that's exactly right. All
What
right.
are your thoughts on the movie overall? How do you
I
compare it to your other disaster movies?
I like it because the I was gonna say the lack of existential threat. Like there's not like a villain, which I guess asteroid movies they villainize the rock itself, but it's more
Right.
nature. I think this is the better version of the nature's coming to get us because of these awful things we've done.
Yeah. Better than The
Um,
Happening?
yeah, no, it's better. It's better than that. Um, and it's better than 2012, which is nature's coming to get us, or Mother Earth is coming to get us because the Mayans made a calendar, or
Yeah.
whatever that movie was about. Uh,
Right.
and I'll take my Quaid over my Cusack. So
That sounds like drug speak. Like it sounds like you're like, dude, give me some Quaads. I don't need no. I'm out of Cusacks. Um,
but
yeah.
I like this movie. My wife is a sucker
Hmm.
for action movies as a whole, and
Yeah.
so we've watched this multiple times. Uh, just kind of leaning in. It's not up there, but it's not awful. I'll take this over ID4, or I'll take this over an Alien movie. Yeah,
Oh
for
wow.
sure.
Okay. I think I take ID4. We gotta get that out of our vernacular. I'll
Yes.
take Independence Day.
Yes.
I think over this one maybe, but they are both fun. Um, it's the
Well, it
elaborate
depends
stuff
on
that
which
loses
level
me.
of Quaid you want.
As
Do
long
you
as it's got
like
that triangular mouth, I'm good.
Well, do you like the sassy um do you like the sassy, funny Quaid brother in Independence Day? Or do you
Oh
like the
yeah.
grizzled kind of leading man Quaid brother in Your Day
Hmm.
After Tomorrow?
I think I'm going to go Randy Quaid over
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid. Well,
Yeah.
of not in their current state, but um, which I'm not sure. Randy Quaid it knows where he is currently, but
Dennis Quaid's living his best life.
he is. He's
He's
in Midway. He's
yeah,
having a bit of a. He's doing
okay.
Capital One commercials.
Yes, and he's also living a real life Parent Trap. Have you seen his most recent wife? That they attacked him on Twitter with like sending out pictures. It looks like he just married the girl from Parent Trap.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I'm going
Uh,
to look that up right now.
yeah. All right. Well, this has been Disaster Movies, and I hope it wasn't a disaster. I
Nah.
hope that this recording remotely works for you guys. We had fun doing this, like talking
Yeah.
about these type of movies. As always, thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe, rate, and review us. Find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, on YouTube now.
Yes, we caught up with 2005.
We did. So we're on YouTube and more. Instagram.
Yes,
Follow us
the Gram.
on the gram, the Iggy. What are they calling it these days?
I don't know. If anyone's calling it the Iggy, I'm deleting our account right now.
At BOWO Pod on the Iggy. We're I don't know what our name is on there, but look us up. We're trying to do more of these videos, these little snippets, which you may have seen on the Facebook page, and on Instagram. Just some little snippets that we can put out there to promote. So enjoy those, share those around. Anything you can do to spread the word. We appreciate it.
And the word should be the only thing you're currently spreading.
Yes,
stay home.
Else.
Now's a great time to catch up on podcasts, so listen to us and what you're already listening to us. But share us with people who don't listen to us. That's a more effective message, maybe.
Yes.
And hit us up at bowopod@gmail.com. We enjoy getting your emails. And thanks to the band Amigo out of Charlotte, North Carolina, as they're playing right now. They give us the music throughout the episode, and to our buddy Wes Forbus for his awesome podcast artwork. We need to get him to do like a COVID-19 themed artwork where like the O's are the virus. I'll talk to him about it. Most of all, thank you guys for listening to Best of Worst Of.
Yes, appreciate you.
Mr. President, I'm afraid our worst fears have been realized.
Oh my God. Do you mean?
Yes, sir. Despite the best efforts of our military, the full cooperation of 26 allied governments, we are facing what will amount to the worst catastrophe in recorded history.
But all our precautions, the missiles, the vaccines, the evacuations, that team of Guatemalan demolition experts.
It's all too little too late, sir. This time tomorrow, I'm sorry to say, the reboot of Frasier will air on NBC.
No!